Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Gent. Tonight is the third installment of More Than Monoliths, artist conversations between Cameron Gray and different local artists. And tonight he'll be speaking with Eulanda Sanders, who he will introduce a little bit later. As I mentioned, I'm Susan Gent and I work at Iowa State University and the Ames Public Libraries. And the Ames Public Library's mission is to connect you to the world of ideas through diverse and inclusive resources and programs. We welcome program proposals, so please contact me or our staff if you have any ideas you'd like to explore. More Than Monoliths is a new collaboration between the Ames Public Library and Cameron Gray's new project, the Buxton Initiative, which aims to promote, celebrate, and create space for an array of Black artists and their work. Cameron grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. As an undergrad at Auburn University, he focused on his feelings about racism in his very first art class. After graduating from Auburn in 2013 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a concentration in printmaking, Cam moved to St. Louis to work as a press assistant with an established printmaker. Cameron earned a Master's of Fine Arts from Iowa State last summer and continues to live in Ames. He has direct and difficult conversations with the community around issues of Blackness and race. His art makes statements and his work is often a form of protest. Cameron wants reactions from people. He wants awareness. He wants dialogue about heavy historical truths and their ongoing effect on Black people. Cameron has shown his work in 6 states and Italy, and I'm sure that list will be growing. As I mentioned earlier, the Buxton Initiative is a wide-ranging collaborative effort which promotes the beauty of Blackness, offering opportunities to learn, celebrate, preserve, and embrace the Black experience. By creating Black-centered spaces, in tonight's case, in this virtual setting, the Buxton Initiative gives voice to Black stories. If you haven't already started following the Buxton Initiative on Instagram, we'll put that link in the chat and encourage you all to follow the project, because this is really just the beginning of what Cam's going to be doing.
Hello, how are you?
I'm going to say goodbye and let you introduce Eulanda, and we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, we will. First off, I would like to thank Susan for that wonderful, absolutely wonderful introduction, and the Ames Public Library for actually providing this space to actually have these conversations with the artists and trusting me on creating that particular experience and bringing that to you. And I hope all of you through the course of these 3 months have really appreciated all the artists you've heard from and their stories too as well. And I'm excited to introduce another story, the last one of this particular series of this juncture. And her name is Eulanda Sanders. I met Eulanda Sanders, when was that? Probably, it was actually my second semester in grad school, because I had a show at the Octagon, and I had to come up with a panel of guests to invite to have this discussion of talking about Blackness and design, which is kind of funny because this is kind of like another part of that. But she was part of that panel, and ever since then, we've always stayed in close contact with each other, and I've always admired the work that she's done and the things that she's been able to do with her textiles of incorporating not only her own history, but the Black experience, from going from, you've been talking about the large voyage as well, of going from Africa all the way to where we are today. And so I've always appreciated the way that she has intertwined all of those stories into where they feel so cohesive within the work that I've always loved about her stuff. And so yeah, like I without further ado, I would like to introduce Eulanda Sanders to you all.
Cameron, thank you for that introduction.
No,
I
for
truly
sure.
appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to be a part of this project. Just absolutely honored, and it's been a reflective and growth experience for me. So thank you. Oh, sorry, but
No. I'm just happy again to have you a part of this, and it's always nice to hear that you all are benefiting from it as much as I'm benefiting from it. Even like these conversations that we get to have uh, offline and even in front of here, it's been very impactful for myself. To even though I know you guys, but to really get to the nitty gritty and get to know you guys even more than when I did. So I thank you for again being a part of this for me. That's just huge.
I truly appreciate it. So thank you. And thank you to the Ames Public Library and Susan, Rosie, Jillian for all of your work and collaboration with Cameron in supporting this project and the stories of artists that are often not told. So thank you for that. And of course, my colleagues at my institutions, I feel I've spent the majority of my life in higher education. And so my colleagues at Iowa State, Colorado State, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, Lamar Community College, of course, family and friends who've been with me throughout this journey. Martha and Leon Sanders, they are my foundation and my rock, and I've been so privileged to be their daughter, and of course my siblings and nephews and niece. So Denise, Freddie, Teresa, Caleb, Toria, Jalen, and Joshua. Everything I do is for you. So.
Oh, I love that. No, I mean that's a perfect segue into the first question I want to ask you. Of course, is like, well, before we even get into like the nitty gritty, if you will, let people know who you are. Like like let them know your background, where you from, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm from Colorado. I was born and raised there, and my parents are from South Carolina, so I have deep Southern roots that moved to Colorado. They met in Colorado and raised my siblings and me there, and my sister and I there. And so um, yeah, I grew up in southeastern Colorado, which is a small farming community, about 30 miles from Kansas City, about an hour and a half from Oklahoma. So um, when people envision Colorado, oftentimes they think it is all mountains and everyone is skiing and snowboarding, but half of the state is flat, very, very flat. And I grew up in the flat part of the state. My parents did spend a little bit of time um, on the western slopes, but a majority of my life was in Lamar, and then I moved to Fort Collins for um, college. That's just north of Denver, and then went to Nebraska for graduate school to finish that off, and then went back to Fort Collins, and then moved to Ames. I've worked in the apparel industry during my career, also while in academia. So I was very fortunate to be able to do both at the same time at one point of my career. And I have started in academia as a graduate student, a lecturer, and then have moved up to full professor, and now I'm a department chair. I also, for a while, was a director for women's studies at Colorado State University, and so I've had a varied career. It's definitely has not been linear. It has been varied, but rich and exciting, and I've been just really blessed with colleagues and friends and mentors that really have been supportive throughout the whole journey.
I would be remiss if I know you just slightly touched on it, but I just want to make sure we reiterate that. Say that again. What is your station here in Iowa State again? I just want people to hear it. Just let them hear it one more time.
I'm the department chair for apparel events and hospitality
There you go.
management. And I'm
There you go.
also the first Black female department chair at Iowa State University,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
first endowed professor too.
That is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And like, I don't know, I remember even having conversations with you about some of the challenges in which it took to actually get to that space. But to kind of transition before we go into that, one thing I do want to ask you about a little bit is when you're creating you're making these different types of dresses and really trying to go into a particular project of trying to figure it out. What is your process of getting to that final product? Because again, like, yeah, what goes to your mind? Does it start with a heavy research aspect of it before you start to look at materials, or is it materials first and then the research, or like how does that happen?
No, it really does depend on the project. In some cases, it is research first, historical reproductions, research about the person, the types of fabrics that would have been worn during that time period, types of silhouettes, types of construction. In other cases, when I'm creating wearable art, I might be inspired by the materials
Mm.
themselves. Sometimes throughout my career, I mean, it's like I've had a long career, so I mean, sometimes I've been I sketch, I make patterns. Sometimes it's working with the materials on a body form and draping it, taking a 2D material and draping it. Other times it's grafting out patterns on graph paper, and so yeah, it is really varied. And you know, throughout my career, I've also had to adapt sometimes because I'm busy, and at one point I was traveling quite a bit, so I had to have mobile type projects, and sometimes I didn't know what they were going to end up being in the end,
Mm-hmm.
because I could make smaller pieces that I could assemble later on.
I
Um,
see.
yeah, so it's really varied, which is fun too and challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that keeps you on your toes and I think, and if I can speak for myself, I mean, that those are the aspects that keeps us doing what we're doing is like, yes, I know how to use the sewing machine, but now, like you said, I'm gonna be on the road for like, half the year. I don't have time to sit on that sewing machine as long. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's always that pivoting.
It is. It is. And like I said, that's what keeps it exciting, challenging. If mass production, yes, you can do that, and but it's the same over and over. But if you're, creating and sometimes creating new challenges for yourself, that keeps it invigorating.
True. So, going back to talking about your process and how you're actually creating these particular materials, understanding what the history of Black textile work and the use of the hands, if you will. How do you feel about now that there are so many different types of technologies that you can use to actually make the textiles and these different dresses and all that kind of stuff into what you do? Like, do you still lend yourself to your hands to some degree, or is there like how do you make that differentiation of which one you're going to use your hands more to, a sewing machine or something to that degree?
Well, yeah, excellent question. I always love working with my hands. I mean, that is always my preference. But I do love technology too, and I've learned a variety of different computer technologies, and so it's sometimes integrating those into what I'm doing, making them a useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do believe in preserving hand techniques, and anyone that has worked with me in an academic program knows that I am very insistent that our students learn techniques by hand and also with technology, because sometimes you will be someplace where the technology is not there, or your technology doesn't work, and you still have to, we teach a lot of computer aided design. That might be pattern making, that might be drawing, it might be 3D modeling. But if the technology isn't working, you still have to continue working on
Sure.
it and making progress. And so you may have to draw it instead of by hand, instead of doing it on a computer, or your Wi-Fi is not working. I had Wi-Fi issues earlier today. I still needed to get things done, and so
Exactly, yeah.
so I think it's important, and then also just a preservation of the hand techniques and that craft is really, really important.
No, I completely agree with you. And let me ask you this. So do you think preserving that, very not rudimentary, but like the what's the word I'm looking for? Very oh man, just hands-on approach. Do you think you got that influence from, your parents and watching your mom do stuff to that degree and your grandma, or do you think it was mainly during your when you first really got into your undergrad career of how things were done there, and that's or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it is absolutely my family. My mother, um, my grandmother, my great grandmother. My great grandmother was a crocheter and a quilter and sewer. My grandmother sewed. My mother learned a lot of her techniques, crocheting and sewing and quilting, from my great grandmother. My grandmother was busy working, and so at times she couldn't teach I didn't have the time to teach my mother. So absolutely, it is generational within my family and my influence, um, and I feel fortunate to have the opportunities that especially my great grandmother didn't have, to be able to explore and showcase work more than her. But oh yes, absolutely family. It came from them, it came from
I
my
love.
ancestors.
No, I remember. Yeah, I think like one of the second to third posts that you made was of your mother, which I thought was really beautiful, and that beautiful coat that she was wearing. Do you still have that coat by chance?
We don't have that coat. I mean, which kills me. It kills me. And we have, when my grandmother passed away, though, I was one fortunate to be there with my mother when that happened, and then help pack out my grandmother's house, and so I was able to, um, you know, have some and ship some of her items back. But no, we don't have a lot of the items that my mother made. I think she, actually got rid of some of them when I was growing. Which just kills me now. And so the hoarder Eulanda Sanders says,
Yeah.
and she also kept everything I made too. I mean, so yeah, yeah. But my mother it was just a beautiful seamstress, excellent quilter. Making quilts and piecing them by hand and quilting them by hand. And it's yeah, just amazing.
That's so
Very
beautiful.
inspirational.
No, 100%. So like, and going back, talking about those materials and those items that you hold on to, how often are you going to visit them? Like how often, like, because if you have them, like, do you go to like, actually just look at them and like, because I feel like there's secrets within those stitchings that your mom had made and your grandmother had made,
Yeah.
and that you could then bring into your own. So like, are there things that you've learned through looking at the material that
Oh,
you're now taking into your own practice?
oh, absolutely. And I didn't mention embroidery, but hand embroidery was also something that my great grandmother um, did quite a bit of. And so I have napkins, pillowcases that she made, and then some that my mother made later on. And yes, I used to, as a child, just study them, look at them, try to replicate some of it. And so, yeah, and now a lot of it is in my studio in Colorado, and I haven't been back there for since 2019, or early 2020. So, and with my um, my career now and what I'm doing, I don't have a lot of time to actually create. Even though I've been inspired a lot. Um, during this process to revisit creating some more. But yeah, I mean, they're just precious to look at, and you know, also wonder what they were thinking. Or
For sure.
because when you're when you're creating by hand, you're processing mentally as you're doing this, and so wondering what their thoughts were, what they were thinking about or working through in life as they were doing that. Hopefully, there's a lot of people I want to interview when I get to the other side, and so I have
No.
questions for
I,
them too.
Well, I see those. I think those stories are important, and like because that's something I've been doing lately too within my own process is just making sure that because my grandmother is 93 years old, and so having that opportunity to talk to her and like really get her stories are something really important to me, and so you know, you know, unlike you have a direct lineage in the aspect of your practice and your grandmother's practice and your mother's practice, if you will. And because I don't have that, I think even just listening to my grandmother and trying to bring those stories into the work itself is kind of how I keep that lineage alive. And so keep going on that same topic of keeping that lineage alive. How do you think, their processes or even their work has influenced your work?
Oh, well, again, just from learning it, and it's sometimes when I'm working on a project, I'm thinking about them and what their thoughts are. Uh, I my mother just has impeccable taste, and I'm hoping that I've gained some of that from her, which I also attribute to my grandmother and my great grandmother. So that hopefully has influenced it, and then just that again, just so blessed to have the parents that I've had, and I truly believe it's because of my mother's passion and support, and being taught by her grandmother, and then being encouraged by her mother of different techniques. And my grandmother did do some sewing and mending and things like that. So that's it's fun to look at her clothes and see where she has mended those and make changes. And she was very petite, and I don't think she was 5 foot. So she was very, very petite. So I'll look at the clothes and see really deep hems that she's hemmed things up. So learning from that, from altering garments, but then also just having my mom being so supportive of my career choice, and because you think about 50 some years ago, this child is like, well, I want to be a fashion designer. I mean, I kind of came out the womb kind of knowing what I wanted to do really early on, and at that time I was like, well, there's no Black people that are fashion designers. I mean, that's what you just heard a lot of people saying, and there were, but no one knew about them, or and so just having that family support of never questioning me wanting to go in the career path that I went, and I truly feel as that influence from my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mom, all really appreciating the crafts around textile arts and fashion, and appreciating that.
That's so beautiful, because it's almost like you're taking their legacy and putting it on even a high, you're letting the world know who they are via your work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
Because they flow through you in that way. And so, like, what was that moment that you're like? Because we all say that, like, and very similar to you, my journey into this art world and this art thing was no one would have ever expected me to be an artist, and people still questioning, like, Cam, what are you doing again? And like ask me questions about what I'm doing. And so, like, having that support system, and understanding the importance of that support system, of you feeling free to be able to do what you what was like one moment that you had with your mother when she saw your work that you were like, oh, this, I will remember this for the rest of my life?
Well, it was, I remember as a child, my mother was making a quilt, and I know I was probably driving her crazy because she was trying, and this one was one that she was machine piecing, I think. And I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, and I was leaning on the machine, and trying to see what she was doing. And so I remember her being very patient with me, and then um, pinning together a 9 block, uh, 9 patch, quilt and block, and then letting me sew it, and teaching me how to do that. So that's a really early memory with her. And then we were going on vacation. We were traveling to South Carolina at one point, and we're going to go to the JFK Memorial Museum, and for some reason I felt like I needed a new outfit for a couple new outfits for that. So I remember taking a couple commercial patterns, and they were plaids, which I did, and I was probably about 8 or 9, and being naive is great because you don't know. I mean, that like working with a plaid is like one of the hardest things to do. But my mother, she didn't say, don't do that. She was like, okay, and I remember, cutting this out, spending forever, trying to match these. She did tell me, you need to match these plaids. I'm like, okay, she showed me how to do that. And I remember spending, probably 2 weeks after school was out, trying to get my little outfits together to go on vacation. And I made one was a little romper, one was a little sundress, and I was all excited for this trip to go see the JFK
Memorial.
Yeah.
I love that. I love to see that that connection again of y'all almost having a conversation between the two of you via the textiles, you know what I mean? And that you're bridging that gap. I remember like even on the Instagram page, you even posted something about your pops of like finding out that you lived in the garment district in New York. And so like talk about that, because like that's even crazy that you had the like I'm sure you didn't even know that there was a connection to garmentry.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, my dad worked for the United States Department of Agriculture. So ag was like talk to us all the time, and so and then ag products and anything around ag, soil conservation, water conservation, everything. Sunday afternoon drives was going to look at wheat fields, alfalfa fields, soybean fields, people's farmland, I made a loan on this farm and this, person, and then everyone's history, and so that was, so agriculture was always a part, and he and my mom were just a great team because they were just, again, very supportive of, any, dream that we had. I just, and it helped provide resources for that. And then, Dad's, introduction into our lives about the importance of agriculture and, natural fibers, it was just incredible. And I remember, one time he went on it was a professional development trip to Mexico, and he went to Oaxaca, and he was so happy to come back and tell me about the wool products and the cotton products that he had encountered there. And so we had some really great conversations about that. And he grew up on a farm in South Carolina, so definitely, again, part of the family, and that connection to agriculture, to textiles was always just been really important and part of my life. So
that's so beautiful to hear that he was even encouraging this thing.
Absolutely.
Like that, like because like again, like when we think about even masculinity within that aspect of like you know, that's not a conversation that a father at that particular time would be having with his daughter. You know what I mean? Like, but then that's one thing I love about again talking about how Black men are not monolithic human beings. Is that, you know, just because that this idea of what we are doesn't mean that that's truly exactly who we are, which I think is beautiful and incredible. So thank you for that story. There was like one thing I wanted to ask you. Oh, speaking about your dad, your ag influence and understanding sustainabilities within your actual materials. How does that come into play when you're actually working? Is that the first, like one of the first things you think about when you're doing the materials that you're making too as well?
Well, you know, the thing is yeah, it's interesting because again, long career. And I remember there was a time that there wasn't a larger discussion about sustainability
Sure.
within the apparel and textile industry. But being a Black person in this country, sustainability and reuse, recycling of materials has always been at the heart of the African American experience in textiles and clothing. I mean, you didn't throw things away. You reused it, you know. So that has just always been, you know, a part of our world. And you know, my parents did talk about it a lot. About that reuse and, you know, resources and natural resources, the importance of that. But just, you know, African Americans, if you know something, if a garment, became, you know, worn out, you either patched it, you mended it, you altered it for another family member, you took the materials and reused it for a quilt or you know, something like a coverlet, or remade it into something else. And so sustainability is not a new concept within the African American experience around textiles and clothing, for sure.
No, you're completely right. Like, I think that's something that I think it's just they just put a different word onto it of like, we've been doing this constantly via, you know, just, you know, like you said, our experiences of hand-me-downs of like in your cousin's old jacket that he had that had like a bunch of holes in it, and your mom going through and mending that, or even reusing old costumes that you had the year before and stuff to that degree. So then taking that in consideration, how, like, when you are, you know, using different materials and making a new piece or a new object, do you keep all the scraps in which you have? Like,
yes, I do. Yes, I do. I do. And someday, and there's a couple of reasons, you know, because, you know, I'm a Black person, you can keep all that stuff. And then I also, my major professor, Robert Hillstead at the University of Nebraska, also kept all those scraps too. So I was just reinforced that just you keep everything. And my poor nephews, at some point when they clean out my studio, they're gonna be like, what is this little bag of all these little scraps and threads that Auntie Yo-Yo kept? What was she thinking about this? Like, you know, thinking, oh, this could become something new. Someone can get a use out of it. No, I mean, it is to the point that when I'm making a garment and I'm having to clip seams and things, I have all these little triangles and they go into a little bag. So yeah, I mean, yeah, someone's gonna find all this stuff someday.
I love that. No. I mean, I do the same thing of like, every single time I create something, if it's not bothering anything, it definitely is gonna stay in my person. Cause like, first off, I just need, you never know when you're gonna have to look back at that piece again to like, okay, I loved how I did this on here. So then how do I bring that into something else? Or, you know, or like, let's just say maybe it gets reused into something else, or it becomes something else too as time progresses. So I totally understand that concept of it. I know you just talked about your undergrad and working in your graduate career. So can you tell me a little bit about how that experience was for you? Because I remember, like, on the post you said that was like one of your most prolific times as a creator. So like, I would love to hear more talk about that process and like being there and how that was.
Well, it was really a time where I was able to manage my time really well and carve out time to dedicate to, yes, creating, learning from what I created. I was very fortunate during my graduate program, my master's program. I was able to work in industry in Denver and then also teach and then take classes. And so during that time, it was great because I was getting inspiration from being in industry, being in the classroom, teaching, the classes I was taking. And so I had, a small little studio room in my apartment and just was making patterns and sewing and knitting and crocheting everywhere I went. I mean, I went on dates and took my knitting and crocheting with me, and I think probably ran off a few people. If you're sitting at the bar, knitting and crocheting, at that time it definitely wasn't the the coolest thing to do, but it was great because I was able to explore a variety of different materials and processes too.
What was one of your biggest challenges while being there? Like I'm sure as much as it was almost like a fairy tale, there were still some things that you
Oh,
probably,
yeah, no, it wasn't very, well, yeah, yeah, I guess, during the undergrad, I was fortunate, there really was not a lot of challenges there. Yeah, yes, I went to a predominantly white institution. I was, one of the few Black individuals in the program and in the class, but you know, navigated that fine and just, um, went through that. I would say probably then later transitioning to a faculty member, there's probably been more challenges in that area. And because during my undergrad and graduate programs, I really just worked on, my craft, just, worked on my craft. So I blocked out a lot of other things that were, going on and just spent my time working on that, which was good because it did allow me to become very proficient and fast at that. So I could deal with, things later on in my life that were more challenging and still have my craft. But yeah, I mean, really, during that time, there weren't a ton of challenges. Just, I was younger, had more energy, could, stay up all night and, continue to work and just, really hone in on some of that. And I think too, again, I grew up in a town in southeastern Colorado.
mm-hmm.
We were the Black family.
Yeah.
Southeastern Colorado.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had gone through some challenges during that time period. So going to a predominantly white institution, and luckily, again, I had, had parents who probably dealt with a lot of things that I didn't know. I mean, I dealt with a lot of things too during that time period of elementary school, junior high, high school. And so by the time I, got to college, it was like, let's just do what I need to do. Because, and I had the tools and, parents who had really advocated and had to a lot, during, earlier parts of my life. So.
What was your who was some of your biggest inspirations to keep doing what you're doing? Because I mean, like I mean, to be honest, I don't know many. I mean, I know a couple now, but I mean, like, who were you looking at as inspiration for some of the things that you're creating, or even like, okay, they did it, so I feel like I could do it.
Really, it was my parents. It was really my parents because, you think back to, again, a long career. You think back, Yeah, I almost predate the internet. So the influences that I had, it wasn't like I could like go on Instagram and like, oh, Beyonce's wearing this, and oh, no. One thing that my parents, did is they used to go to the Ebony fashion show in Denver.
Mm.
And there was a program that came back from that, and this was a fashion show that was curated and created by Johnson Publishing Company that produced Ebony and Jet magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would go to that, and it was a completely Black fashion show. The commentators were Black, the models were Black, and the program was just beautiful. And so, they would go to that with, some other family friends and, bring that, that back to me. And I would just, again, sit and just pour over the Ebony Fashion Fair program, because they had, photos of the models and, the commentators and everything. Years later, I went to the show too, several times when it was still running. But that was a big influence. See, now at that point the designers were not Black designers. Eunice Johnson, the founder of the show, she would travel to Europe and buy from European designers for the show, and of course ran into many challenges trying to get into design houses, and sometimes purchase $10,000 gowns at that time, for this runway show. But that was a very inspirational to me too. And then having access to those print magazines. Again, living in southeastern Colorado during the 70s and 80s, there was there was not a lot of content that I could grab to. So
Sure.
my parents were really that influence, and watching my mom when she made something, looking at the style of that and then looking at other magazines.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can see that being extremely impactful, because you're rarely seeing that being broadcast. You know what I mean? Of seeing beautiful Black women in these gorgeous gowns on runways, and because it just makes it seem like it's possible, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Which I can see extremely encouraging, and so like when you got into so like now that we've kind of gone through your your undergrad career, so like when you got into the actual fashion world and was actually trying to maneuver through that, or anything like, did you find any pitfalls throughout that time of of ways that you almost felt discouraged through the things that you were doing, or was it pretty like when you first came out, everyone was like, "Oh, we're gonna buy it. Eulanda, you good? Like, you don't have to worry about it."
Well, there was a couple things that I did. And, again, it's such a different time than now.
For sure.
I did have, I guess I still do have the company. It's not very active because I've been busy with several other things, but I did have some fashion shows, local ones, and when I was actually undergrad and through graduate school, and people took orders on for clothes, but many of the things that I did at that time was so labor intensive that it was very hard to make a profit margin from that, and turn out items that quickly. And it was just me making the items at that time. When I worked in industry, I worked for larger corporations, and again, I was there might be one or two other Black individuals in the company. I worked in Western wear for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do I look like a Western wear designer? No.
Yeah.
So there were some challenges there, as you can probably imagine. And it was funny though, because I ended up doing some of our fashion shows and photo shoots for our sales team for a Western wear company that I worked for. And no one I would probably ever have guessed that, I was the person that was, working on these. And, later I would see individuals, that, our target market definitely wasn't me.
For sure.
Demographically didn't look like me. And, so then I would see people around later on, in, garments that I was involved with the development of. And I just laugh and smile like, you would never guess that if I walked up to you and said, I made that pattern, or I did the first, sketch of this. They never would have guessed.
In that position, even when you were working for them, do you feel like you had that space to where you could get into your own stuff?
When you're working for large corporations, no, not really.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, I mean, the target market is defined, and and they're staying in that because they're looking at that profit. That has been the joy of being able to also be in academia. And when I was in both academia and industry at the same time, it was great because I still had that freedom to do other design work that could be submitted to juried exhibitions and in galleries and things like that. Designed for my friends, but yeah, when you're working corporate, there's some freedom, but you're really looking at, okay, what am I going to make the most profit margin off of?
For sure. Talk about that balance, because I feel like that's huge. How did you find the time to work there, to do the thing that they're paying you money for, but then like, okay, but I still need to feed my spirit.
Yeah.
How did you find the time to both of those things work?
Well, I've always been fortunate that I've been someone that can operate on not a lot of sleep.
For sure.
At least when I was younger. And so I didn't, 4 hours sleep, you do that. And, and then, when you're involved in working on something that you truly love, you're willing to, stay up and work on it and dive into it. So
for sure.
Yeah. So I was fortunate with that.
No, I look, because I think that's exactly something that everyone's going through, right? Especially when you talk about creatives, of like understanding that work-life balance of like, how do I start to, even if I'm not working for a particular organization that I want to be working for, I can still try to find that way of putting that into the work itself. Did you ever find yourself working with a lot of Black designers during this particular time, or did you ever find that collaboration that you could work with other Black designers?
Oh, I wish. Partly is because geographically where I've been.
Yeah, I got you.
There's not a proliferation. What's fortunate now is that in my role, I've had the opportunity to work with more Black designers, Black scholars, graduate students that have entered our programs, and that's been great to be able to support a diverse group of students, and making sure that they're getting the opportunities too. But yeah, it's there are a lot of Black designers out there and Black product developers, but having those opportunities to learn, gain access, attention of the media. We are more fortunate now that people can take control of that a bit more themselves through social media, which is really, really good.
Sure.
Then we have projects, like this one, the Buxton Initiative, that's giving outlets. So I'm excited about that. But it's also making sure that people have the resources and the tools and some of the background on how to get their work out there.
Exactly, and I think that's something I think people benefit from having an instructor or someone like yourself in there of guiding them, because I feel like even like I've dealt with this myself, of listening to that one person that you think is leading you the right way, just to see that they were following you astray in a sense. And so to have somebody who looks like you telling you, you know, who really has your you wanting you to succeed and wanting you to be a part of this family, if you will, of Black designers, of actually genuinely trying to help you out rather than, you know, trying to keep afraid of your competition.
Right.
For that. So I really appreciate you being there for your students and being and seeing that manifest itself as beautifully as it is. So we have about 8 minutes to about 8. I know it goes by so quickly. Well,
Cameron, would it be okay if I showed some of Eulanda's slides again, since we're talking about these garments?
Speaking of which, go to, you know which slide I need to see. This will be the last thing I'm going to ask. And I want everyone to be able to see this garment that I'm talking about, because it is truly, truly amazing. If you get a full screen on that, like we're gonna make sure that people get to see it to its fullness, and its full. Yes, there we go. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, please, 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 like, and I remember seeing this for the first time and being blown away by it. And, you know, I'm still going to get one of your garments for sure. Like that is definitely something on my to-do list, but like, can you please give the people and me the story behind this beautiful piece of work you've made right here?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Well, this one is Mademoiselle Josephine. It was part of my master's thesis project. And I have always, loved Art Deco, the Art Deco style period. So I chose that topic for my thesis. And then as I was researching it, and my parents had mentioned Josephine Baker in the past, and I was looking at photos of her and pictures of her. So I started sketching ideas for this collection for my thesis, and started sketching pictures of her face, and so this piece is hand knit, started from the bottom up, and I used graph paper to basically design her face for this, and then I did embroider her eyelashes on there, but and her eyebrows, but everything else is and actually part of the eye, but everything else is hand knitted into the garment. And so really it was just a tribute to a woman who was strong, defied a lot of challenges, racism, discrimination during her life, but continued on. And so it's one of my favorite pieces too from that collection. And so I have my collection of women that I would when I get to the other side, wherever that is, I'm hoping I'm on the side with all these women, because I would love to have conversations with them, and she's one of them that I would love to have a conversation with too.
For sure. No, oh, my bad. I'm sorry.
There's a Q&A question.
Oh yeah, I was gonna follow.
Great.
But I was gonna what I was gonna say is, like, she lived her life her way. You know what I mean? Like she saw there was no avenue for her here, so she decided, okay, well, I won't stay here. Like it wasn't one of those things of where she felt pigeonholed or like, I got to figure out a way. She's like, well, if they don't want me here, I'm gonna go somewhere they want. You can see that the strength within that piece, within even looking at the silhouette of you wearing it and the way that your feet are planted and all that within even this photograph, which I think is absolutely stunning. And I think this is I haven't seen many, like, even looking at more of your portfolio, I think it's the first time I've ever seen a face or something like that being actually a part of the actual piece. So can you talk about the reason why you decided to, in this particular form, to actually represent her like via figure?
Oh, well, I thought she was just beautiful. So I thought, well, and having just a part of her face there, peeking out basically from the side seam of the garment. I just, yeah, I mean, it just worked. I just, was doing sketches and, thinking about placement and her face and her life and her journey. And this is really, I would say, probably the start of me looking at stories of women and using that in my work. And you'll really see that thread through quite a bit of my work. And then my dissertation work was on African-American female slave narratives. And so telling those stories, I had hoped at some point too to do some replication of the women in my dissertation work within textiles. And maybe someday, maybe when I retire, I'll revisit that opportunity. But you don't see women, especially Black women, represented graphically on garments very often.
You're
so,
right.
Oh, this would be a fun opportunity to do this. And
so beautiful. Like I could even see you doing portraits of your grandmother, great grandmother also.
I would love to. I would love to.
That sounds so beautiful. So good, so good. Okay, so let's. So there is a question in the Q&A, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask this to you, and it says, "Your series of pieces associated with chaos theory are amazing. Can you please discuss more about the theory and how you have applied it into your work?"
Well, what's interesting with chaos theory is that it's really repetition and order, even though it sounds chaotic. That chaos part is those interruptions in it. So I liken it to if you're sewing a seam on a sewing machine, there's a rhythm, there's a repetition as the needle is going up and down, but you might hit a slub or a thicker thread in the fabric, and there's a little bit of a disruption. You might hit a pin in it, and there's a disruption. And so there's almost in every apparel process, textile process, there is order and pattern, and then there's some disruption, and you have to somehow reorganize that again. And I apply this to organizational management, like life, leadership, all of that, in many ways. And so within the felting process, which I use wool fibers in the fractal analysis series, there are, there's the rhythm of steaming or washing wool fibers and them entangling themselves together. And, you have to, have order in that process, even though it might, if you accidentally wash a wool sweater in the washing machine, that might seem chaotic to you, because you're not yet expecting the results that you want. But in the pieces that I've been working on, there is definitely order in that. And so that's basically the fractal part of it. That's kind of a quick summary of that.
I love that. So like when those things do happen, like you say you hit a pin or you have these imperfections within the actual creation of the work, do you keep those or you try to? Okay, cool.
Yes, and so much, they create opportunities for well, it's a challenge, because that's always, sometimes it's frustrating at first, but then it can be fun, just trying to figure out that problem. And then sometimes you end up with work that's better than you expected.
Exactly.
You're able to integrate that disruption into your work too. So.
I love that. No, I love that so much. Susan, is there any more questions or anything that I missed by chance?
Nope, it looks like you've got them.
Okay. Well, I first would like to thank Eulanda Sanders for being here. I want to thank you first off. Thank you for being here. I don't know why I sounded so formal, but Eulanda, thank you again for your time and the space that you've provided to share your story and share the things that that hold dear to your heart with the Buxton Initiative and this particular project for me. This was huge. It truly means a lot that you did this, and I'm forever grateful for you. And I can't wait for our discussion on August 22nd to have all of you and the other great women that have been a part of this, inaugural program in one room together to talk to you. Before we leave, I do want to ask that, if there's anything you want to plug or anything you want to say before we go. This is, let me know.
Well, first, Cameron, just thank you. And I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. And I just truly appreciate your friendship and, having you as a colleague. So just thank you for this. And again, thanks to my colleagues at Iowa State University and in the Department of Apparel, Events, and Hospitality Management. I feel just blessed to be able to work with some of the best people in the world there. So
that means a lot to me. And I'm trying to think. To everybody still here, if you'd like to learn more about this particular program or see more of Eulanda's work, just head over to the Buxton Initiative page on Instagram and you'll see more of that. If there's multiple ways of helping us to keep this particular initiative going, we'll be unveiling more programs too coming soon. So if you would like to know everything that's going on with the Buxton Initiative page and new programs that we're going to be doling out over the next couple of months, just follow that page and there'll be more information there. If you want to help out, there's also, you can contact me or go to that page and we'll show you ways of how to volunteer and help out with bringing the Buxton Initiative to other people. So again, thank you, Eulanda, for this. And thank you, Susan. Thank you to Ames Public Library. Thank all of you for helping bring this whole program together and bringing it to the community too as well. So I want to thank y'all. Thank everybody.